Silent Victory, a solitaire war game published by Consim Press and distributed by GMT. This is based on the same game system of The Hunters, a game that came out in 2013. They both have to do with submarine warfare in the World War II. It is just that The Hunters is set in the Atlantic and Silent Victory is set in the Pacific. A solitaire game where you play the role of an American commander that is hunting for Japanese ships in the Pacific and trying to sink as many big chubby ships as possible. So, it's a solitaire game and it can cover quite a large span of time. It can cover the entire war if your commander is lucky enough to survive through the war and not to be relieved for cause. It is also a game that shares similarities with the classic B-17, Queen of the Skies, and B-29, which was based on B-17. It is, in a sense, an abstract simulation. It's not the board that attracts a lot of attention. It's not where you're submarine is in a detailed map, also because we're talking about the ocean, so some detail can probably be sacrificed there. It has a little bit of an abstract quality, which nevertheless is meant to capture the factors involved in this type of warfare from the point of view of the commander, of the captain. This is very important. There are other simulations of submarine warfare out there, for example, several ones published by Compass Games that give you the campaign. The Hunters and Silent Victory tell you the story of a captain and the crew that is working with that captain. Let me show you how the game works. In this game, you will play the role of a commander of a submarine, one of the submarines represented in these player rates here. They're also double-sided, lots of options. More options here than you had in the previous game in the system, The Hunters. Also, these player rates are of higher production quality. They look attractive, they're very sturdy. I like them very much. Once you choose the submarine that you will control, you set it up by placing counters on it. There's a counter that represents your grade as a commander, a counter that represents the quality of your crew, counters that represent the ammo that you have, mainly torpedoes that you will fire at your enemies. Different submarines will have different capacities of carrying weapons, and also there are different type of torpedoes that you can have represented by counters that may be flipped to represent the type of torpedo that you're using. Here you have the forward tubes where you can load, in this case, 6 torpedoes, and here you have an area where you place the extra ones, and here you have the aft torpedo, the tubes, and also an area for the spares. Once you fire the ones that you have in the tube, you can reload them for further combat. An area to keep track of hull damage. No need to tell you that this is bad when this marker goes up there. And another marker to record possible flooding during combat. The flooding level is brought back to 0 at the end of combat because all the water is pumped out. An area here in the player aid to record bad stuff that is happening to your engines and motors and other type of miscellaneous damage. This is where you will place counters indicating damage that you received in specific systems. Crew status, it may be bad stuff for because members of your crew may be wounded. Maybe it's good stuff because actually they gain upgrades, they get better at doing what they do. In the case, also, you record that by putting a marker there. Oh, I forgot something important here. We're talking about the weapons. You also have anti-aircraft weaponry and a deck gun, again, with ammo that needs to be replenished between patrols. This area here abstractly represents your position in one of the patrols that you will be assigned to. So to start the game, you need to determine where you're going to be sent. And depending on the submarine that you have selected, you will start the game in different periods of time, because some submarines are only available later in the war. I suppose that I have, like in this case, one that is available from the beginning of the war, from 1941. Then here you go. At the beginning of my patrol, I simply roll on the column indicating the time of my present patrol, and the result tells me where I'm going to go. At that point, I will use this marker here to represent the areas where I am. Suppose I've been sent to the Philippines, then I use this line here, or the China Sea, or the Marianas, and so on and so forth. You can also choose, instead of using this abstract area here, the player rate, to use these two very attractive player rates representing maps, and they're slightly different depending on whether you're based in Pearl Harbor or in Australia. They're really nice. You simply move on this area here, but functionally they're the same as this player rate here. So what happens is simply then the game is divided in turns. Each turn represents what happens as you're traveling in a box, as you're transiting to reach your main area of operations. Stuff happens when you're in the main area of operation, then there are 2 more transit turns as you try to make it back home alive, pretty much. For each turn, for each box that you are traveling into, you consult this other table here, the encounter chart. You simply look at the column indicating the area where you are, transit, not much stuff happens. You may encounter a single poor ship that is unescorted, or you may be attacked by aircraft, and that is pretty dangerous. And then, as you can see, different areas in which you are will present different combinations of possible encounters. Maybe a ship with an escort, a convoy, means a large group of ships. You will only engage to up to 3 or 4, not because that's the maximum size of the convoys, but because that is the number of enemy ships that you can reasonably try to target. Aircraft, again, 2 ships and escorts. Occasionally, some big enemy like a capital ship or a warship. So you roll the die and you determine what happens next. Maybe nothing, and then you simply advance to the next area, or maybe you do cite something. In this case, you need to roll on further tables to determine the nature, the exact nature of the encounter, the composition, the type of capital ship, for example, the encounter, which warship, what are the ships that you encounter. And at that point, you decide what you want to do. You may decide to engage or not to engage with the enemy. To determine the exact nature of the encounter, I mean, who is there exactly, we need to use these 2 player rates that are double-sided, and one is used mainly to resolve combats and encounters against small freighters, and the other one against large ones. Rather, it's not really to resolve combat, but simply to determine the identity. To resolve the actions that will follow, you use this other player rate here. Effectively, it's pretty much another board. I know it's pretty abstract, but it works. Now, the encounter specification will tell you whether the people that you encounter have an escort or not. So you simply place a marker there if there is an escort. It's a pretty abstract way of telling you that they'll fire back and possibly even get to fire at you before you fire at them. You roll to determine the time of day, and depending on the circumstances, you may decide to attack from the surface, or in most cases, it will be a submerged attack. Incoming hits, so that we don't need to worry about that. And range, you decide if you want to attack a long range, which of course makes it harder to hit, but it's also safer. Medium range, as pluses and minuses, it's kind of dangerous, but not too much, and you kind of hit from time to time. And close range, which is of course, so it's easier to hit, the easiest to hit, but also the escort, if present, may get a chance to attack you even before you attack them. You may get detected before you get a chance of firing the first shot. But back to us, to these player rates here. Now, it will sound complicated when I tell you how you generate, how you determine the ship that you get to encounter, but it's really not. First, you roll a die to determine the size of a ship. You determine each ship individually. You roll a die. 1 to 4 is a small ship. 5 or 6 is a large one. So I already know that of these 2 player rates, in this case, the small and large, we are going to use the large one. Then I roll another die to determine which of these rosters I'm going to use. Each player aid, the small one and the large one, has 3 rosters, as you can see, for a huge variety of possible encounters. And what you do is, as you can see, they're labeled A, B, and C. Then on the second die roll, 1 to 2 is A, 3 and 4 is B, 5 and 6 is C. So now I'm looking at the player rate at this one, and then finally I roll 2 dice to determine a percentage. I personally use the black die as the tens and the other one as the units. So I rolled a 0.8 on this table here, and that means that I met this ship here. Now I know it's a large passenger ship. P for passenger, large is because I'm using the large player rate. With this tonnage here, which I record on this log sheet here. This is an extra copy that I printed from the website of the publisher. I want to know the exact identity, but I also want to record the exact tonnage because that will determine how many points I score at the end if I defeat the ship. Then here we have counters representing possible types of ship. In this case, we said large passenger. Here we go. As you can see, there are 2 numbers printed on this counter here. Other types of ships, so for example, the small freighter only has 1. Because this represents the number of hits that it takes to eliminate that ship. Large passenger vessels, depending on how large they are, how big they are, may take 3 or 4 hits. I look here, and here it tells me that if the ship that I am looking to place on the board has between 5,000 and 999 tons, then it goes on the 3. Then it takes 3 hits. This one, remember, is 5,500, so it goes on this box here. If it was over 10,000, then it would go here. And I repeat the procedure for every ship that I encounter until there is a corresponding marker here, corresponding counter on each column where I am encountering somebody. If it's a single ship, I'm done. Suppose it was 2 ships without an escort. All right, then I roll the dice. It's just to show you how actually quick it is. 1, it's a small ship. 1 is the A roster 45. A roster on the small player rate, and I have it here. This is the ship that I encounter. As you can see, once you know how it's done, it's super quick and it takes much less to do it, to resolve it, than to explain it. So the situation maybe will look like this, where you have multiple ships. You determine the range. Suppose I want to go at medium range, and then you transfer torpedoes from the tubes on your player rate. Remember those? You transfer them here and you assign them to the targets. You can assign them all to a single target. You can split them. Suppose here I decide to want to fire 4 torpedoes at that target there and 2 at that other one. Once I have assigned that, I am at medium range, a medium and a large. You get to attack first. Then I resolve the attack, which I do using the combat tables, which are here. For each torpedo that I'm firing, I'm rolling 2 dice, and the number to hit is based on the range. Here at medium range, I hit with a total roll of 7 or less after taking modifiers into account. Personally, when I hit with a torpedo, I place it here as a reminder, and then the ones that don't hit, I move out of the board. Suppose that I hit with 2 of those and 1 of these. It's important because once you hit, you may still have a dud. You still have to check if the torpedo actually does damage or not. This is very important. It's very historical because early on in the Pacific War, the Americans have had a lot of problems with torpedoes that simply did not work, did not explode at the proper time. So, depending for each torpedo that does hit, I check the column that that corresponds to the type of torpedo that I'm using. I roll a die, and I'm looking at the numbers corresponding for the periods in which I am resolving combat. If the number that I rolled on a d6 is within this range here, then nothing happens. The torpedo was a dot. As you can see earlier in the war, most torpedoes, after you did so much hard work to hit the opponent, most torpedoes will be dots. Later on, things get a little bit better. Dots are simply removed. They do nothing. So suppose at the end, there's still a torpedo that did reach the target, that did explode, was not a dot. Then finally, I roll on this other table to determine the damage. Roll a die, apply possible modifiers, and here we go. And simply determine the number of damage points that you inflict on the opponent. That gun has a similar procedure, but this is what you use to resolve that kind of combat, that kind of damage. So as you can see, if it takes a lot of luck, but if I am lucky, a single well-placed hit may in fact destroy the opponent, may sink most things, or maybe suppose I only gave a point of damage, then I simply move that marker there by 1 point up on that column. If I'm able to move that on the top, then I destroyed the target entirely. If I destroy the target and maybe the encounter is over, well, that part is done. But if there was an escort, then now the escort gets to attack me, and it's super simple. You simply roll on this table here to determine if the escort detected you or not. Roll here after applying modifiers, and the range within which your modified result falls will tell you what happens. Undetected, hooray, you got away with it. If you got detected, and maybe really well detected with a 12 or more, you need to roll on this other table here to determine how many hits they inflicted on you. And this is when you use this column here to mark the number of incoming hits. You resolve the hits by rolling on this other table here to determine the exact nature of each hit. So you roll 2d6, you read 1 as the tens and 1 as the units, and you look, for example, here I have a damage 11, which is batteries. I may get diesel engine, crew injury, radio hull, a lot of bad stuff may happen. Once I resolved all of those incoming hits, this is why it's so useful to have this play rate here. I resolve a hit, I take a marker and place it on my main board to determine what happened there. I move that, repeat until that is done. But once they hit you once, that doesn't mean that you're out. That means that actually you're not out of the trouble yet. They actually, get a better sense of where you are now. So they are going to try to attack you again. Once you got detected and you resolve the damage that you received, you go back here and you roll again, apply modifiers again until you are undetected, because if you're detected again, you go back here, then back here, and back here. And you continue like this until your sub is completely destroyed or until you finally go undetected. Once you resolved all of the events that take place in one location, you move to the next location and repeat the procedure. Roll to see if something happens, if you encounter something, in which case resolve the encounter. Move on until either your sub is destroyed or sunk or somehow forced to surrender, and continue like this until you complete your patrol. In which case, at that point, you check how much tonnage you were able to sink, and you record that. Also, you write an F because the mission failed if you didn't sink anything, or an S, the mission is a success if you sunk something. And then you move to kind of like a logistic phase, which represents the refit. Your sub is in port. Depending on how much damage you took, it may take you a long period of time, so a couple of months that you may have to skip before you can go on another patrol. The minimum time that you will take between patrols is, in any case, a month of refit, so you will simply write refit in the next box, or again, multiple ones in case you took a lot of damage and it takes a while before your sub is ready to go back on track. record that other things may happen, your crew may be promoted, you yourself may be promoted, which gives you several advantages. So you have a little bit of an upkeep phase that keeps track of what happens to your crew and your submarine between missions during the refit phase, and then you continue like this and you move on to the next patrol. And this is how the game works. You continue playing until you survive the entire war, or your sub is destroyed at that point based on the total tonnage that you were able to sink, as recorded on this player rate. You determine your level of victory or defeat. And one last thing that I want to show you is a component that wasn't there in the previous installment in the game system, in the Hunters, but we have it here. It is this set of nice, very sturdy player rates that allow you to play the role of historical captain. So there are specific rules to specific game abilities that relate to different personalities, to different captains that took place in the war. So these nice player rates on one side, they have the game aspect of it, and on the other side they have historical reference about the events in the career of the person that you're playing, whose career you're simulating. There are a lot of other things that are part of the game system, and I'm not going to list them all because they have to do with small details that account for possible events that would happen during the campaign. These quote-unquote details are very important because they flesh out the story, because they give the world of the story depth, they give it a three-dimensionality, they really give you the sense that the game is somehow a story generator, as it covers a lot of possible things that may happen, from crews being injured, being promoted, maybe somebody in your crew gets too good so gets transferred somewhere else, a lot of different stuff that may happen. And all that stuff is not something you have to learn about, is not mirrored by a million rules that you have to learn. It is all hardwired into the tables. So you roll on the tables once you have the general system. You roll on the tables and the theme happens. Events happen. Actually, I think if you know the previous game, the Hunters, you can get started with Silent Victory very easily. You pretty much only need to read maybe just the summary of combat on the player rate that you use to resolve combat, which is very well done, and you can go. Of course, you'll be missing details, but you can then read the rulebook later to add them. The changes to the previous system are not big. To the previous installment in the system are not big. There is one, however, that is significant, which is now in Silent Victory, you can attack the escort. The escort remains this sort of like abstract entity. What matters is whether the escort is there or not. That means that then you need to try to avoid detection and so on and so forth. But now you can attack the escort, you can direct some resources there, and if you hit, then the escort has a disadvantage when they're trying to detect you, when they're trying to hit you. Trade-offs there because there are resources that you're locating there that you're not locating somewhere else. But it's good to have that extra option, it's good to have that extra ability there. If you don't want to use it, then not a problem, but if you want to, then you have that extra layer there. It's a game that I like very much. I like it very much. Compared to the Hunters, again, the differences are not huge, but they seem to be significant to me in terms of production. Just things look prettier and nicer and sturdier, and the player rates are thicker. You have more options also in that you have more types of submarines that you may try. You have the cards, some cards that help you to play historical commanders. It is just a game that seems of higher production quality than the previous one. System-wise, mechanics-wise, they're both very good. Silent Victory, I preferred because of those other aspects and the escort option. So in general, not talking about comparison, is the good game. It's a game that relies on a very well-respected system, the B710 system, which feels horribly dry, and probably procedural until you try it. to non-war gamers, but most war gamers have tried some of the games based on this idea, and they know that actually cycling through those tables, rolling dice, and updating stats somehow can bring to life an incredibly vivid picture, an incredibly vivid story, precisely because this is a system that allows to take into account so many different variables, so many different things having making it may happen again, from all sorts of things, from technological advancements, disasters that happen, stroke of incredibly good luck and bad luck. Now we're talking about submarine warfare, so actually that means that the pace of the game is extremely discontinuous. You may be kicked out of the game, lose the game, and be relieved for cost simply because you went out 3 times on 3 patrols and you didn't sink anything, which maybe happened because you didn't find anybody. You were sent to hunting grounds that didn't have much prey and you were very unlucky. Ta-da! So you went through all those turns and nothing happened and you're kicked out of the game. Of course, you can start again. But then, when you have these moments of lull, in most cases actually will be punctuated by moments of intense action. But again, with some anticlimactic, frustrating moments, because you do sight a really nice convoy and then something happens, a random event or whatever, you're not able to follow them, you're not able to complete them. You unload all of your torpedoes on this single fat target, you hit with all of them and they're all dots. Or you just hit the opponent, you bring it almost to be destroyed, and then you, in this case, you can choose to try to follow them with further rounds of combat, and you can follow them and you unload everything you have and they simply manage somehow to limp away. And you are left with nothing but regrets and bitter memories. So it is a game that has a luck factor, but again, I think it's very well suited to the theme. It really is welcome here. If it was too much like chess, then I think that the theme really would not be captured. So I like the random factor. I like the unpredictable pace with long turns when nothing happens, turns with intense bursts of action, and then followed by months of refits that will cost you, because of course that means that your sub is out there less often. So overall, at the end of the campaign, you will have accrued fewer points because you will have sunk fewer ships. Some really big random elements. I had a campaign that ended simply because my sub got destroyed in a minefield in the Chinese Sea. I just got 2 bad rolls after, like 2 hours of good play, and that was it. And I wasn't all that mad because it still fit the theme. So, not for everybody. When you're talking about war games, about submarine warfare, it's an acquired taste. It takes a specific type of gamer, I would say. It even takes a specific type of war gamer to appreciate the advantages that this kind of game can give you. But of course, if you are able to go past the unusual idiosyncrasies that games portraying submarine warfare necessarily will present. Silent Victory is a very good game. I enjoyed it. As much as the Hunters, probably a little bit more, just because the production is more pleasant and there are more options, but they're not really all that different from one another. In any case, Silent Victory, definitely. If you enjoyed this one, I think this is going to be a very nice experience for you to play. If you haven't played either, maybe this could be a good place to start, and then you may add the Hunters later. This one, again, is just slightly better than the older brother, but both good games, and this one, per se, a very good game.